Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank City 8 very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. And my talk will be a little bit more about why I'm here together with some mayors from this corridor that stretches about as far as from San Jose to San Francisco, or as far from London to Cambridge, or Tel Aviv to Haifa. And it is something we're trying to develop, and we're trying to develop it in every respect, both in terms of a number of the issues you're discussing today, which have to do with city building and community building, but also from the standpoint of economic development. As one of the leading startup hubs in the world, which is rapidly becoming. But the two are inextricably linked, and I'm going to try and tie them together in my remarks, so I will spend more time talking about the story that is this corridor, so that you can take that back to the places you come from and hopefully understand our story better, because one of the things that has been said to us is that it's a story that hasn't been told very much, and of course it's not going to tell itself. That's how I have to explain in any event to the media when they wondered why I'm leaving Toronto that was enveloped in a snowstorm on Sunday night to come to California. When I gave a television interview back home this morning with the beautiful hills and sunshine of San Francisco in the background, they're saying, well, how is the weather there anyway? And I said, never mind, it's really quite cool here. I want to just start by telling you a story about a startup in the process of scaling up, and that's something that I know is of great interest to people in this part of the world, but to a lot of people who look at the economy of the future as well as the cities of the future. Again, the two are very much tied together. Some of you will know this story. You won't know its Toronto connection necessarily, but Wattpad is a company founded in Toronto by two guys, Alan Lau and Ivan Ewan. Alan was born in Hong Kong and moved to Canada at age 19 to study engineering at the University of Toronto. And this notion of somebody being born somewhere else and moving to Toronto is not an uncommon story. 51% of the people who live in the city of Toronto, now North America's fourth largest city, were born outside of the country, the highest percentage of any city in North America and one of the highest in the world. He founded a mobile startup, and Ivan was his first hire. And although they both excelled at science, their real love was about literature and storytelling, and they had an idea that people would and could and should be able in the future to read on their mobile phones. So they wouldn't just read text messages and tweets, but they would read stories and serialized novels. And that was back before phones were smarter than we are. I often talk about software, some of which we still have in effect running the city government in Toronto that's 25 years old. And just because people often have trouble envisaging 25-year-old software, I showed them a picture of what a cell phone, a mobile phone looked like 25 years ago. And of course, you carried it with a strap over your shoulder, and it was about the size of a sort of a small briefcase. Technology, at the time that they invented Wattpad, had not yet developed enough to support the platform that they were imagining. But they bided their time. They didn't just blithely move forward. They developed the idea while they continued to work successfully on other things. They got their ducks in a row. They ironed out the kinks. And right when mobile technology evolves at the right point, they launched Wattpad as a mobile storytelling platform where people can post their stories, read the works of others, and interact with authors online with a community of people who also love to read and write. Of course, a great part of this, like so much of the internet and how it's changed our lives, is the democratization of what I'll call publishing, and how people have stories on there, not just who are renowned authors, but people who have made their own effort to express themselves in some way or other. Alan and I have rented an office space in downtown Toronto where their employees can take transit or ride their bikes to work. And as one aside that ties together the bulk of your agenda, which has to do with city building, and this talk that has to do with becoming a center that's welcoming to innovation, the connection between the two is indispensable. The urban form, the infrastructure, the city building in the broadest sense, and the ability to attract the best and the brightest. And I've spoken at a City Age conference in Toronto before, and I'm not sure we hold out to be the model at all for a lot of the issues you're discussing and being at the forefront of those, whether it's transportation or built urban form and so on. I think we're learning and we're catching up. I think we have been more of an example on showing the world how a city that does consist of 51% of people who are born outside the country can live together and can embrace each other and celebrate each other in terms of our differences and some of the things we've done to create a more humane kind of existence for people who come together and live in a large urban area. To come back to Wattpad, they hired a young multicultural staff with a variety of skills, many of whom had in fact immigrated to Canada from other countries. or were first-generation children of those who immigrated in previous times. And one of the reasons they'll tell you their business has been successful in Toronto, which is where they built it and stayed, is because they have access to people who speak dozens of languages and can take the literature generated by those countries and people in those countries and make sure that they can support that right in one place. Today, that site, born out of that background that I summarized far too superficially for you, has 40 million unique visitors and more than 2 million writers. It has a huge commercial reach, but it also is making a social impact, helping to do something that we believe in very strongly in Toronto, and again, part of city building and part of a city's hugely important infrastructure, which is using culture and using forms of expression of all different kinds to bring people together because they are unifying factors. In 2014, Wattpad completed its 4th round of financing, and it is helping them to fuel their fast-paced global expansion. But that actually is not the startup that I want to talk about today. I want to talk about Toronto itself as a startup and the corridor that we're part of between Toronto and Waterloo. And some of you may not even have heard of Waterloo. You might not have even heard barely of Toronto. But Waterloo is a city that's about as far away as London is to Cambridge or San Francisco to San Jose. And it is home of an incredible, innovative hub as well, and a university that is world-renowned. In fact, it itself represents the #1 source of recruiting of talent for companies, many big and smaller companies right here in the Silicon Valley, rank up there with Stanford and with other schools of that ilk. And you know, it's interesting because Alan and I, who founded Wattpad, believe that their story could only have occurred in our corridor. And that is because of this unique alchemy of talent and education and diversity and global connections and financial conditions that allow them to stay where they call home, and I would argue a certain way that we have come to live together, which I think is really why you find the city of Toronto ranking in the top 5, and usually in the top 3 of the most livable cities in the entire world. And I'm delighted that some of my colleagues who are mayors in the corridor that really represents the same way of life and the same commitment to how people live together are here today. Barry Romanovic, you will hear in a panel that will take place, I think, after lunch. But I think that has been fundamental to this, and I think that, you know, in the end, isn't that really what all the planning, I'll call them planning discussions that you're having today are really all about? They're all about people. They're not about build form or about train lines on a map or these kinds of things, or even how you build them or how you finance them or where you put them. They're about enabling the success of people. Enabling the success of people, not even enabling the success of cities. Cities will be successful because people are successful in finding opportunity for themselves, supporting their families, being supported by those communities, and living in a place that they find to be livable. But in the end, I'm one of those who believes it all does come back to jobs and careers, because those help to create the wealth that in turn allow us, I think the way we see things, particularly in Canada, to be a means to an end, not just for the sake of creating wealth, but for the sake of financing social programs that give people the supports they need when they're either struggling or trying to get started. And that, in turn, I think is going to be fundamental, and certainly has been for us in attracting the best and the brightest, in building a livable, welcoming, practical, sustainable series of cities that form this corridor between Toronto and Waterloo. Toronto's motto is "Diversity is our strength." And this kind of sounds, I know, like a sort of bland Canadian kind of thing to say, to the extent you think of us as being bland, inoffensive, nice people, and we're all those things. But, you know, I'll be candid with you. Well, we've been having a very interesting debate, and I say we because we watch these things very carefully about the size of Donald Trump's hands. We, at the same time as a country, have accepted 25,000 Syrian refugees. And we've done it in a way that I think is a model for the rest of the world. And I say that not to boast or to brag, but just to tell you that a lot of that has been done thanks to the efforts of families and church groups and neighborhood groups who decided to step up and sponsor these people to come. And I'll tell you one more thing, because we've been through it with Ugandan refugees, we've been through it with the Vietnamese refugees in the late 70s. They will be instrumental to building our country and to building a stronger, more accepting, more embracing, more successful, fairer country in the years ahead, even if they're starting off now with next to nothing, given the service. Lest you think we're just altruistic people who do these things because, you know, we're doers of good deeds. We happen to believe, and I say that not exclusive to, because I know Americans believe this in their heart too, that people perhaps sometimes have different views than some of those who get more prominence on television. We believe this diversity and this embracing of diversity is a huge competitive advantage for us. I cited the example of Wattpad and how people from 50 different language groups work inside that company in downtown Toronto today. And they do that because it allows them to be a global business from Toronto. We have one of the strongest immigration systems in the world, strongest in the sense that it has allowed millions of people to be admitted from all of these countries around the world, but doing it in a careful way that also makes sure that we are bringing together the right kinds of skill sets and all those kinds of things that are going to allow us to, yes, look inward at our own future success, but also look outward to global opportunity. I would say to you that Toronto is an experiment that has worked, not to perfection, but it has worked. It is chemistry and innovation and collaboration and adaptation come to light. And the very fact that I'm here with 3 of my colleagues who are mayors in cities where previously we might have said, well, those people are competing with us for jobs because they're just up the road and they have their own wonderful university at Waterloo and so on. We're saying no. Actually, when it comes to competing for the best and the brightest, both people who are corporations and people who are individuals, we're going to do this together because our competitors are, frankly, the Silicon Valley and London and Cambridge and other places like that, and so we're going to come here together. It is also been a factor in success here. If you look at the unicorns that have been created here, more than half of them have been created by immigrants. And so we're just simply saying if that's the reality, that the clever people are going to come from all over the world, then we want to welcome them and make sure that we can become the undisputed knowledge center of Canada and one of the most undisputed knowledge centers in the world by embracing people from all over the world to make that happen. We currently have, and when I mentioned this number when I was in Austin last year, trying to learn about how music and culture has so much to do with the attraction of creative, innovative jobs. I mentioned that we had 400,000 post-secondary students in that corridor between Toronto and Waterloo alone. People said, you must have some mistake in that number, and I said, no, that's not the mistake. We have the highest rate of post-secondary education in the developed world in Southern Ontario in this very corridor that the 3 of us have the privilege of representing. The students in those institutions are in 16 different institutions of post-secondary education across the corridor alone. That's just in that one narrow area. We have the highest concentration of PhDs in the world in artificial intelligence and machine learning at the University of Toronto. We have institutes dedicated to quantum computing, theoretical physics, computer science, and mathematics. So I guess the bottom line of all of this is that we have an awful lot of very smart people. But it isn't just about having smart people. It isn't about having transit systems. Ours need a lot of work. Believe you me, one of the biggest issues we've heard about from our people that we've been meeting with at all the different companies down here in the last couple of days is that our transportation within this corridor is not adequate to make it easy for people to move back and forth. We've heard that there are problems here with that too, but we can't be smug about that. But I think at the end of the day, what we have that I just commend to you, and I commend to an important part of your discussions to put those into context about transportation, about resiliency, about affordability, is the way we live together. And we don't have it perfect by any means, but we have been ranked consistently as one of the best places in the world in which to live, not just because we have a huge concentration of financial services or life sciences or all these things that have to do with jobs, 200,000 tech workers working in 15,000 different technology companies. But at the end of the day, I think that what we have is a place where we can have a humane place to live, intersecting with financial critical mass, with healthcare critical mass, with technology critical mass, and things like that, which then allows us to have the kind of environment that will attract the people who are going to generate the startups and in turn both retain and draw talent to our city region. In short, what I think has been most important, and the physical characteristics you're discussing in a number of the sessions today are important to that, but so are the human characteristics, which are that we are trying to create there, not perfectly, but trying to create a place where people want to live, and where they live together in a way that they can identify as being different. And I think that a lot of this has to do with things like public transportation. Public transportation, again, too often gets discussed in the context of drawing lines on a map, or how it's financed, or what mode of transit you use, as opposed to looking at it the way we're increasingly trying to look at it, which is it is the most fundamental means of connecting people to opportunity. And it's no accident in the city of Toronto, where we haven't done as good a job on public transportation, that the areas we would like to call priority neighborhoods, which is where there are larger numbers of people struggling,